Here we go. And it should be up and running.
Oh, hang on a sec. I'll have to mute this.
There's a bit of an echo with you, Vivien. I don't know if...
Yeah, is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, hang on a sec. Let me just...
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Just bear with us. We're running over the last few technical elements. Should be all good.
Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you for joining us for our next session all about well-being and holistic health. I'm very pleased to introduce you to Vivien Lau, who is our holistic well-being specialist. And because her bio is so impressive, I'm going to have to read it. So just give me a moment. Vivien has spent over 25 years navigating her way through different leadership, technical, and project portfolio analyst roles through her corporate career, but always had a passion for philanthropy, studying alternative therapies, including mindfulness-based yoga therapy, intuitive energy healing, spirit-guided mediumship, color therapy, crystal healing, Reiki, and other modalities in her spare time. Vivien ended up leaving that corporate rat race, yes, and now dedicates her energies to GlowStarHive, her holistic coaching business. Originally established to teach young women between the ages of 9 to 16, three very important tools. She specializes in three very important tools, including resilience, self-identity, and interpersonal communication skills. Vivien has responded to COVID and is now widening her target audience to include all ages and provide valuable support and guidance to those who need to navigate their way through uncertain times. So yes, big warm welcome to Vivien. Thank you for joining us here today. Before we dive into the questions, I just like to do a bit of a housekeeping for anyone who's new. So as I'm sure some of you are familiar, we have been running this summit for a couple of days now. All of our summit panel discussions will be recorded. So in case you missed this, you can always catch the replay as long as you're subscribed, which is great. Other things to note as well, each of the panel discussions go for about 50 minutes, and then the last 10 minutes are dedicated to Q&A. So if you do have any questions that pop up, just feel free to add them to the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen, or you can just pop it into the chat box and we'll get to it towards the end as well. Other things to note is we are offering a prize giveaway. So if you do end up engaging with the Q&A, you go into the run to win one of the prizes. So we have a bunch of books to give out for self-help and development, and also some in relation to workplace culture. So that's a nice little bonus. And we're also offering a consultation package with me specifically in relation to resolving workplace culture and toxic workplace culture and some issues you may be having with that. If you'd like to find out more about the incentives, you can always check them out in the perks. Almost done with the housekeeping. I just think it's also important to mention the fact that, yes, we do sometimes discuss elements that could be triggering to those who either are currently in a toxic workplace or who have previously experienced it and may not be completely healed from the trauma. So just be aware that we do have a trauma therapist on hand. So if any of you are experiencing a sense of disturbance, just let us know in the comments and we'll be able to arrange a 15-minute free consultation with the trauma therapist to help you through that, because your psychological safety means a lot to us and we do take it seriously, and you're not alone. We're here to help. So please keep that in mind. And as a final point, we also have hotlines listed on the website as well. So in case, no matter where you are in the world, we've tried to list those for you as well. So you're in safe hands. So with all of that said, Vivien, I think now more than ever, we need all the kinds of healing that we can be looking into. It is such a state of unrest and uncertainty. I would love to hear, I mean, you've been on such a journey from more of the corporate side and now to the holistic healing. I'm sure you have your fair share of toxic workplace culture experiences. Is this something you're familiar with? Have you, dealt with this before yourself?
Yes, thanks, Catherine. I've been fortunate enough to spend quite a lot of my work life in working in great working environments, which has made it really, really obvious when something wasn't quite right. So from my early 20s, anytime I experienced any bad taste of uncomfortableness within my work environment, I would likely resign and avoided those unpleasant sort of situations.
Mm.
I was never really exposed over the long term to a toxic work culture. I was never in that situation as such. However, as I had more life responsibilities, and I wanted to focus more on my career development, I became more exposed to it. So sadly, over a 6-month period of my working career, my work environment had spiraled into a place where I felt totally unsupported, and I was confused with my work priorities and the role within my team. And
Mm.
I actually questioned who my team was. So when I looked around, I saw passive aggressive behaviors, some bullying, narcissistic behaviors, um, off the cuff comments, which I felt, I couldn't work out whether they were jokes or
Mm.
whether there was some underlying truth behind it. And I just didn't understand those sort of behaviors. And I guess it also made me feel a little bit more distant and somewhat segregated from um, the workplace culture that I had previously enjoyed.
Mhm.
And especially working in an environment where you have posters of what great work culture should look like.
Yep.
The commitments and the commitments around the office about workplace inclusion, I really
Mhm.
felt excluded.
No, and it's funny that you mentioned this because the same exact thing came up when I was talking to the lovely HR panelist we had earlier, and she was saying the same thing. You can post up as many wonderful sayings about how inclusive and great the environment is, but at the end of the day, if that's not actually reflected in the tone and the mood of the workplace, it doesn't make a difference. So it's good that you're open to that as well.
Yeah. But for me personally, I started to internalize it all. So
Mhm.
I became really anxious and was really easily triggered and quite emotional at one stage. But over a period of time, I became quite numb and emotionless. And I had quite a lot of health issues, which I know that you talked about in some of the previous other sessions,
Yeah.
being gut issues, elevated blood pressure, despite being on medication, and I had other health issues. So I was later told by one of my regular medical practitioners that I was nearing a nervous breakdown, which was
Mhm.
lucky, but she was aware that I was taking measures to protect myself
Yeah.
and that I was looking after my well-being. So fortunately, I have had the opportunity to remove myself from that toxic environment, and now I'm able to work on my holistic coaching business, which gives me a lot more motivation and drive and reward.
Amazing. Um, and I guess that like holistic, I'm from a marketing background, so like I have a list of buzzwords that are just frequenting my space, and I feel like that is one of the key ones that has popped up, especially in the last year or so. But buzzwords aside, I would love to know a bit more about, what holistic even means. What does that kind of cover? What is GlowStar all about? Yeah, just please let us know.
Okay. So have you ever heard the saying that your energy introduces you before you speak?
No,
Um,
no, I
so
haven't.
Oh, yeah. Well, so it's just indicating that when you walk, you have a presence, and that presence communicates lots of, I guess, the non-verbal and the unseen and the felt experiences that are present for other people. So it's not just your physical body that's present and your thoughts. We exist on multiple layers, and that includes your emotional well-being, your social wellness, and also your spiritual layer. So a holistic approach would delve a little bit deeper into trying to uncover root causes and explore the best way to approach and encompass all those layers.
Hmm. I think it's It's funny because there's a lot of talk about how it affects you on a molecular level, and how you just carry things that you don't even realize. So I think that it is interesting to be open to this kind of element of holistic practice that people might not have been initially open to, but it's still very much relevant to anyone who is looking at ways of resolving their well-being.
Yeah.
So with that said, I think, let me have a look. Yeah, now more than ever, I mean, with COVID happening, we are hearing a lot about how to look after our well-being, how to, you know, consider our the spaces around us and nurture our energy and everything else in relation to that. What are you, yeah, how are you currently evolving given the COVID crisis and this reliance on technology and remote work?
Yeah, so I fell into a heap a while back. So it was probably a couple of weeks ago, and I really felt like I'd lost my sparkle and definitely lost my flame. But I had to pick myself up because I knew that I could dwell and become a victim of feeling unsettled and you know, really struggling with the whole new restrictions that we're placed under. With social distancing and self-isolation. So I basically said that no one was going to come to my pity party.
Good. Yeah.
So I had to learn to really adapt and shift my own mindset. And what my home represented no longer was just a place to rest, eat and sleep. I used to come home and escape from technology. And I think I used to turn on my laptop maybe once a fortnight, maybe. But now it's a tool that I use every day, and it's a way that I use to communicate, but it's also a way that I use if I want to exercise and have someone guide me through a meditation. And it's also the only tool that I have besides my phone to connect to my family and friends now. So yeah, definitely different.
I know, and I think this is kind of, it's scary to think that the boundaries that we initially had around technology are just increasingly getting blurred, so it is more integrated in every element of our lives, almost to the point where we can't control the level of technology that we're handling. I will probably be talking about this in a lot more depth in the cybersecurity conversation, but I think it is very interesting to consider in relation to what it is doing to our well-being and our overall health, especially because we aren't getting that same interaction on a screen. I mean, like, we are humans, we require that in-person connection. So yeah, there are some things that the screen just can't compensate for. And I think that we're all really feeling it right now during these restrictions.
Definitely. I'm an extrovert, so I'm used to going into the office and starting my day with connecting with people and following up on emails to re-energize myself for the day. But now I need to kind of self-motivate myself and to find that energy within. So I either start my day off with something like exercise or try and tap into my creative activity just for the first part of the morning. So it refuels me. So things like, you know, I'll go out and water the garden and just be amongst nature, or I would cook or plan my day around what type of meals I could be cooking, or start painting and just pick up a paintbrush or pick up a pen and start drawing and trying to use my creativity, which previous to COVID and our self-isolation, I had suppressed for a very long time. Yeah.
I think it's so important that you mentioned these boundaries that you set for yourself as well, because it kind of creates a comforting routine. And there's, I saw on Instagram earlier, actually, there's like a trend that's happening at the moment where people say, I stuck to my routine for a week. So it has a new kind of reward to know that despite all the chaos that's happening externally, you can still create your own sense of boundaries and routine, like internally as well. So yeah, I think that's really good to keep in mind what you said about having like a structure, and also embracing elements of your personality that maybe were you know, something that you would one day do. Those one day things, I think, are becoming more of a right now option, which is a really nice way to look at what's happening.
Definitely. So besides keeping to a structure of my day. It's also knowing what I want to achieve, just on a weekly or daily, even daily basis. And I like to try and challenge myself and push myself out of my own comfort zone, which is very much why I wanted to take this opportunity to speak in this forum.
Thanks. I think it's out of everyone's comfort zones. It's not something I'm familiar with either, but it's fun.
Yeah, and why not? We've got this totally strange environment that we're in, and why not give it a go? So
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I was reading up, obviously, all about GlowStar, and I saw that you sort of specialize in elements of awareness, whether that be self-awareness or awareness of the environment around you. I'd love to know a bit more about what that meant, because I couldn't really decipher it. And I'm very curious to know what your idea of awareness is and how we can practice awareness in our lives.
Awareness is really important. It helps us understand and gives us light and focus on what really matters the most to you. Mm-hmm. It's almost like prioritizing your work tasks, but in a personal space. Mm-hmm. I think to make the session effective for our viewers and to get the most out of this session, it might be worthwhile doing a brief awareness activity.
Ooh,
so what are your
sign me up? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what I would like I welcome everyone here to close their eyes, and you just bring your awareness to your breath. So as you breathe in, breathe out. If you're uncertain where to place your hands, grab your hands and place them on your belly button. And just keep breathing in and breathing out. As you focus on your breath, I'd like you to lengthen your breath. And as you breathe in, think of a white light that's traveling from the top of your head in with your breath and travels down through the core of your body. As you take your next breath in, visualize that white light traveling in through the top of your head, down through colors. So the colors being violet, indigo, blue, green, to yellow, where your hands are. Let that white light flood in through the top of your head, down your core, and radiate through your hands and emanate a yellow light from your navel out. And let it surround you and your environment around you. So I'd like you to take a moment to consider, why do you go to work? What is your motivation to keep going to work? And what binds you to your work and your current situation? As your thoughts and feelings come up, just continue to focus on your breath in. And with each breath out, let those feelings go. So breathe in and release them as you breathe out. Release them from your core. As this activity comes to an end, I'd like you to just focus on your breath and start twiggling your fingers now. I'd like you to bring your awareness back to your surroundings. So what can you hear? What can you feel? Can you feel the seat underneath you? And can you feel the heat or the cold on your skin? And can you hear any noises that are surrounding you? And bring your awareness back to the room and to the session.
Thank you for sharing. That was incredible. I think that it goes to show that we carry so much in our bodies. I felt instantly lighter just after even just a minute of doing something like that. I will admit that I'm not really used to breathing practices or mindfulness, but it is something that I'm hoping to implement more. So thank you for sharing. Hopefully everyone got a little bit out of that, and they could practice this kind of awareness for themselves in their own time as well?
Yeah, I think it's really relevant because you'll pick up pieces of information that's more relevant. So once you provide that awareness, you've got the focus now on what information you really want to grab out of this session. And I think that's the piece that's key to having that awareness.
Mm-hmm. So let me just recollect my thoughts. That was really was good. Thank you. Yeah, so actually you mentioned this before when you were talking about your toxic workplace culture experiences, and you touched on it briefly, and you said that there was a lot of like lack of role clarity, and it was hard to, you know what to do or where to step because of the various sort of games that were at play. And I think that this is something that many of us can relate to, either having previously experienced it or currently experiencing it. So I would love to know how can you kind of create clarity when there is a complete lack of clarity, and bring this awareness in?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I really kept an objective view and really tried to identify what were the elements around the situation. So I identified that there were really two parties involved, one being myself and my leader. Anything else was just noise, and I didn't really need to have any other influences. So to get straight to the core of the issue, I checked my measurable key performance indicators as per my, so we had a scorecard, and that's what my performance review was based on. So I went straight to that and had a look at what my contributions to the team and then to the wider organisation I was bringing. I also looked at my role description set by my leadership team and what was previously approved and what I signed up to initially.
Yeah.
So then I then checked our team purpose initially with my leader, because I felt like that the goalpost was moving as such, and I really didn't know where that was going. Which meant that the things that I knew existed were no longer there and in place. So I really had to ask myself, what is it that I value about going to work every day, which is why I did that awareness piece here today. The stability is something that I value. So I need clear and constructive leadership. I like open communication. And those things weren't being actualized because the experiences that I've had in the same work environment were just non-existent with different leadership.
Yeah. So I think, like, I really appreciate the way you combine both the physical awareness that you have about your body and your senses and what that's telling you, with the practical awareness of, have you been hitting your KPIs and those things that kind of remind you of your worth, irrelevant of the toxicity around that. But then at the same time, there is that fine line between, like you said, it really comes down to your integrity and knowing what you think is worthwhile, and whether that still aligns with your internal values. So at the end of the day, KPIs almost feel more like vanity metrics, and if they don't align with what brings you that feeling of light and joy, then it's definitely worth reconsidering why you go to work, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So under the circumstances, I actually had a look at all my, all the things that were influencing my toxic workplace and my perception of that within that space. And I basically got to the stage where I felt like that I needed to remove myself from that unhealthy situation. So I know that we look at other ways of trying to resolve conflict, and whilst I was very much about resolving all conflict and challenging where I felt that the goalposts were moving, in that same sense, I got to the stage where I was tired and I was exhausted, and I didn't really have that passion in there anymore, where I knew that my values weren't aligning, so they weren't worth what I'm fighting for. So.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to note as well. At the end of the day, nothing's really worth your health, and it's certainly not worth that feeling of, I actually learned this recently, it's called moral injury. Instead of it, there's a whole lot of hype around burnout, but I think that moral injury is actually more problematic, because it essentially means that the purpose behind why you're going to work no longer aligns with why you began in that field in the first place. So I think it's really important to do that self-awareness check and just make sure that you're still there for the reasons that matter to you most. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. And along with that as well, you also specialize in communication, and I think that kind of goes very hand in hand with awareness, because you're not only aware of yourself but also of others around you. Many of us have faced dealing with communicating with very difficult bosses who just don't want to communicate at all. I would love to know what your take is on communication and how that can be implemented in different environments as well.
Yeah, so it's really important for me to have felt heard. So that lack of communication really frustrated me. It's common for me to have made requests verbally with no details or context. So it would be a manager coming to my desk and just saying, "We need this." So there was little to no detail. And I feel really uncomfortable about trying to get a deliverable when I really don't know what the boundaries are. Mm-hmm. So where possible, I would try to relate any information that I had or that I could find and seek, and I would take all that information and kind of bundle it all together and try and either reapproach my leader or the person who made that request, mm-hmm. Or formalize it in an email, just to ensure that I actually got the information right. Because I didn't want it to ever get to the stage where I felt like that my performance was being judged and that It was my performance that was at fault. Mm-hmm. But a lot of my emails were left unread or unresponded to, so I don't know whether they were read or whether they were unresponded. Mm-hmm. I did try and maintain my professionalism and integrity in my work, so I would also forward any information that I had or any developments on that piece of work and request for feedback. I use this method almost as an email trail, mm-hmm. which I know that you spoke about in the Toxic 101.
Thanks.
Yeah. So it was just to cover myself, I think. Mm-hmm. And sadly, we are challenged in many ways. And as you mentioned, that effective communication can't always be established, and that compounds to the situation.
Yeah, I think so. And it also sort of leads to that element of favoritism, because, and I did mention this as well, like when there is information withholding and when you can't really communicate properly, that information that should go towards you and furthering your productivity and outputs goes towards someone else, and that power gap widens. So how do you sort of deal with these elements of favoritism at work, and maybe the subtle suggestions that you are not good enough, or you're not doing your job good enough, well enough, and for whatever reason you're to blame for the various mishaps that may occur? I think that confidence piece, it can be really hard to keep in mind when you're having every subtle and overt reminder that you're not up to scratch for whatever the reason. Yes,
so I definitely did experience favoritism. Mm-hmm. I was not one of the favorites. And I just went straight back to the facts. So for me, it was very much about understanding the situation and trying to take ownership of what I could control. And in my first instance, if I needed to brainstorm or get my feelings out there, or that sense of feeling heard, I would seek out my trusted, supported group, whether that be professionally or personally. Mm-hmm. I really felt like I needed my safe place to tell my story, and to have someone have my back, really. It's not very nice to have people within a so-called professional environment talking about things that isolate you from the situation when you have every right to be able to own up or to speak up in that environment to defend yourself. So the other thing is, regardless of what happens, you still need to walk back into your workplace professionally every single day. And I knew that I needed to release a lot of my emotions at that time when I was getting frustrated. So as you were talking about it earlier, is on a cellular level, we do hold a lot of negativity within ourselves. And as I explained, it manifests in me in a lot of different ways. So my sympathetic nervous system had started to shut down. I started to have adrenal and liver fatigue. You know, like it was manifesting in different ways. But I also didn't want to play the victim. So I knew the symptoms were coming out and being presented to me in a physical sense, but I didn't want to play the victim. So I checked in on my thoughts. So what was the negative talk in my mind, and what was the patterning that I had in my, so, you know, when you start talking about something, you would refuel and re-engage or re-trigger those emotions. And I knew that whenever I was triggered, that I needed to keep working on that. Because I knew that subconsciously my behaviors were responding in a very negative way, and the energy that I was generating and sending out there was as a result of this environment.
It's
so
funny
I found, sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say, just it's funny that you mentioned that, because apparently our brains can't tell, doesn't have its own form of time. So if we're explaining a story, our brain registers that as reoccurring. And I think this is it's good and bad, because if you are constantly retelling those stories of negativity and that becomes your narrative, it can be extremely detrimental, because you're essentially reliving it over and over again, and that doesn't help move past that victimized narrative and onto a more clear path where you can make room for the things that matter and move away from everything that's been holding you back. So I'm really glad you brought that up as well. Thank you.
That's okay. Yeah, I think on that point, it refers back to the fight-flight response. And so the people who are held highly in cortisol, you know, when you're fueled with high cortisol, you're really, really stressed. And traditionally, when we were in the caveman era, we would have an immediate threat, and we were able to remove ourselves from that threatened environment or perceived threat. But in this stage, whilst we go into work every single day, or we continue to expose ourselves on a longer term to the same trigger or that perceived threat, our bodies, just as you said, just think it's a constant. And so it remains and retains in that state, which is exhausting.
Yeah. And it's no wonder that you end up having those sort of physiological and psychological symptoms, because like our bodies are consistently fighting against this world that we've created. So in saying that, how can we protect ourselves and our well-being, even if our externalities are constantly kind of creating that fight or flight behavior?
So I've made sure I really took on board that it actually wasn't my problem. It wasn't a personal attack at me. It wasn't an intentionally done. So the environment that was created for me to experience that wasn't intentionally done. It was just the way I perceived it. So I did try and maintain my awareness on my values, and that's what I really stuck to. I also kept my boundaries. So leaving work on time. So I didn't want to spend any more than I needed to in my work environment.
Yep.
But I knew that for my mental health that I needed to leave when I needed to. So, and as I said earlier, I documented everything. So there was an email trail. I removed myself from any of those situations where I felt really uncomfortable. I also made sure I was utilising all opportunities for self-development at work. So enrolling in soft skill courses. I think Ali talked about it earlier today.
Yes.
Yeah, so workshops and lunch and learn sessions all about health and well-being, and how you can develop your skills within such a toxic work environment. And it was really evident to me that it was just a very small part of the entire organization that was triggering. And sadly, it was my world, but there were other areas that I could gain some sort of relief. So I also flooded myself with a lot of positivity, and I made sure
Good.
I had
Yes.
friends that were going to support me and help me through and help with that negative dialogue that I had started to tell myself. And I didn't want to get dragged down and have to respond to passive and aggressive behaviors. So I maintained my personal integrity with that. But as I mentioned before, I was also dealing and experiencing quite a lot of health issues at that time. So from a physiological level, I definitely maintained my exercise. I was meditating most nights. I also needed, muscular joint pain, having to go to the chiropractor. And I also went to see my acupuncturist and kinesiologist on a regular basis as I was going through this.
It's really great to hear that you prioritize your health and well-being even in times of stress, because I think that's often the first thing to go, and people lean more towards like the vice habits, whether that's reaching for an extra snack or an extra drink after work, or just doing things that they know are detrimental to them in the long term. But it's just when you're in that survival mode, it's so easy to get caught up in just doing whatever you can to just keep going. But now, like during that period, more than ever, it's important to be looking after yourself. And I think I touched on this. I think we've all touched on this, but it's good to keep reiterating it. So thank you. So the next thing I wanted to ask as well was in relation to, let me just double check. Yeah, so for those who are currently stuck in a toxic workplace environment due to economic obligations, what can they be doing to look after create those boundaries, look after themselves? And I mean, you mentioned it briefly, but more in regards to that sense of unknown and that fear and not knowing what to expect. I think that can almost eat away at you in a way that the rest of it can't. So I guess creating a sense of stability for yourself, even if there is this real unrest happening around you.
That's correct. Yeah. So you may have heard that fear is the unknown of the future, unknown future, and worrying is living in your past. So it doesn't serve you well to be existing in both and being torn between the past and the future of the unknown. So bringing yourself back into the present and the now to focus on what's here and now and what's true, what's not true and factual. I think it helps you at least empathize with the situation and stay focused on what's at hand, instead of spiraling into the unknown, which is not something that you can control. So I understand how difficult it is to be spending 50% of your awakening hours in an unhealthy work environment, and that I sought a lot of chocolate and a lot of coffee.
Me too, for sure. Yep.
And for those who drink, maybe drinking a glass or two or a bottle. Yeah, and I think that our current restrictive lifestyles just create a new sense of instability for everyone. But I think it's really key to understand that everyone has been impacted in some way or in some degree, and that the struggle that we're experiencing is something that's shared. But like any change, we can leverage off that, and we need to look at the current situation, and from a holistic perspective, we can focus on what's important to you and what you can do within your environment. So it can be an opportunity to become something that can be quite empowering, because you might be able to discover things that you haven't thought of doing for a very long time.
And I think that I mean, on the one hand, it's easy to say but much harder to do in practice. So as you touched on, it's especially hard when it is those long hours and those that element of toxicity that's constantly impacting your life. You can't just necessarily switch off and go, okay, I'm going to be healthy and get into my creative spirit now, because it's not that easy. So I guess for the people in the room who might be listening to this and going, that's nice for you, but that doesn't apply to me, or I'm glad that worked out in your case, but it doesn't work for me because of so and so. How can you sort of encourage everyone to realize that we do have this opportunity in our lives to be implementing this, irrelevant of the circumstances that surround us?
Yeah, I think it's really important to make space in your day. I think it's really easy to stay busy and to either focus or to get caught up in what the media is saying, what social media, who said what, and getting distracted with lots and lots of memes for the day, or so it's knowing what you value and reducing that noise that's around you that doesn't serve you. And what you value. So that includes removing yourself with situations of negative influences, including groups and communities within the social media network. Sadly, because some things that you do really, really love waking up to every day, but they don't serve you. And if it's instilling any sort of negative emotion and fueling more fear or insecurity, just remove it, because you don't need to expose yourself and cause harm to yourself unnecessarily. Yeah, so like any good work performance conversation that you should be having, this is about you. So bring your focus and your attention back to you. So look at what tools that you currently have that you may not have used in a long time, or what skills can you use, and it's not just from a professional development perspective in order to help you within a work environment. It also means working on your personal skill set and your soft skills that you hold. So for example, if you want to learn more about breath work, take that time to breathe, because now, instead of feeling, we need to feel through all negative emotions in order to heal from it. So a part of the grieving process is very much about acceptance, awareness of what it is, acceptance what it is, processing it, and then being able to release that for what it is. So really feel through it and process it. But we do have communities around there that are great at sharing great good news stories. So
yes,
I don't know if you've heard the Kindness Pandemic. That's a Facebook group.
They've had like 3,000 people sign up in 48 hours, I saw yesterday. So they are doing exceptionally well right now. Yeah.
So it's really, really nice to hear good news stories.
I think in regards to that, sorry to interrupt, I was going to say, in regards to that as well, there's an idea about like an information diet. So essentially you should be curating the information that you consume in the same way that you sort of curate the rest of your life. So be really selective about the kinds of things that you're digesting, either subconsciously through advertisement that's being thrown at you, but also the actual information that you're subscribed to. So they use this was from Crunchbase, I think. They use the analogy of social media is kind of like the food you shouldn't eat but enjoy. So they were just like, everything in moderation, just keep that in mind. And yeah, it was just kind of nice to think of the food that the information that we consume as food, because I think that that's a really interesting way of going, okay, have I had enough balance? Is this a nutritious plate, or am I just binging on something that I really should let go of? So it's funny that you mentioned that. Thank you.
Yeah, it is very much, the saying that you are what you eat, but it also is everything that's around you is the energy that you're absorbing in, and if it's influencing the way you're thinking, you're also putting that back out into the universe, and that gets radiated out, but then it always comes back to you. So what you're putting out there is also what's coming back to you, threefold. So it's
I think
very
so.
important to to check in on what you're flooding yourself with. And yeah, so that analogy of that information diet is fabulous.
Yeah, I'm practicing it myself, so we'll see. Um, so I guess in relation to more of the holistic practice, it's quite a journey for you to have gone all like from the corporate side and now to be on almost the other end of the spectrum, practicing everything from like Reiki to breathing to meditation to communication. How did you make that leap for yourself, and how did you start realizing that maybe it was time to transition to a different career path that you never would have imagined before?
Yeah, so I think Tanya tapped on this as well. I think
Yeah, she did.
early in her career, she was a beauty therapist, and like myself, I was a beauty therapist.
Oh, I love
So
that.
we,
That's awesome.
yeah, it's crazy. So we focused on, the aesthetics of things and
Mhm.
things that made us feel good and look good. But then as I've grown up through my life and continued on through life, I realized that there's actually more than just, the superficial and materialistic things.
Yeah.
And I found that there's actually more beauty in feeling good inside and radiating that out from an energetic perspective outwards. Um, I was really fortunate that early in my career, I was involved in a leadership team who was taught the coach approach. It was demonstrated to us and how it was used, how this tool could be used effectively,
Hmm.
and that we were told that it would be able to empower our team and they would own all their actions and outcomes. And if someone told you this, why wouldn't you take that
Yeah.
that tool? Um, so as I practiced and practiced, I would use my gut feeling and intuition about where I was guiding my conversations, using the coaching tool to get the best out of my team. And as my career path developed and progressed, I became much more interested in developing my coaching tools within a management perspective. I also found that there are many, many different dimensions that people operate on. So over the years, I explored different therapies, as you mentioned. So,
Hmm.
and I also wanted to understand how we operate as people in a physical body, but also understand from a spiritual perspective and on a cellular level and on a ethereal level, what that looked like and how we heal. Um, and I found that throughout that time and that process of growth and learning for myself, I developed a very strong sense of my intuition and my ability to read the environment and the people around me became really, really strong.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to leverage off that and utilize that ability to read through the energies and utilize that and use that within a coaching environment.
It's nice to know that it was sort of always part of you and there in the background in some way. And the more you leaned into that and listened to where your intuition was taking you, the more you realized that this was sort of always for you, even if it didn't necessarily fit the traditional career model or the path that you'd initially set for yourself. In some ways, it's kind of all led you there in the same way anyway. So that's a nice touch as well. Thank you. So I always like to, I'm just aware of the time. We have 2 minutes till questions, but before we go into it, I'd love to ask just a couple more questions. One is in relation to, I like to throw in at least one devil's advocate question. So, I mean, like I touched on briefly before, I think holistic is a bit of a buzzword, and some people would see it and go, oh, if that's so woo-woo, like, what does that even mean? Like, spiritual, how can you prove that? Where are the facts? So I feel like there's a lot of naysayers when it comes to this element of spirituality. But then on the flip side, it's also on the rise, which is quite interesting to see how it's become a lot more mainstream, and we're seeing it in media and magazines and so I feel like there's almost two sides of this conversation. So I guess for the people who are maybe on the other more cynical side of things, how do you think that this holistic practice could be implemented within workplace culture, but also just within anyone's lives, irrelevant of whether they necessarily believe in this kind of spirituality.
Yeah, so I read a meme today, which I thought you'd find it appropriate and
Yes.
give you a laugh. So when the world goes woo-woo, go cray-cray, but in a pandemic, the non-woo-woo go cray-cray and the woo-woo remain calm.
I love that.
It's a good flip to it.
That is perfect.
No, I do recognise that holistic practices, some holistic practices, even the ones that I've done, like psychic development, learning about spirit guide animals, and intuitive healing, there's and others of the like. They're practices that don't have tangible outcomes. However, the one thing that I do know, which is true and fact, is that you can't ignore your own gut and you can't ignore your intuition. And when I know that and believe that there's something that I have experienced yet can't explain it, I know there's something greater and something more beautiful out there, because it gives me a sense of zen, and it almost provides me that safe space and that place of sanctuary. So who doesn't want to be in that place? And you know, if you're pulled towards that, then and I did keep it a very like a secret a lot of the times, as I was learning the process and learn through the courses, and would only tell my close, probably open-minded friends.
Yeah.
But over the years, I've learned to integrate the two worlds and kind of take things like, I'd take an amethyst cluster, crystal cluster, into the work environment. And for me, what that symbolizes, besides just looking at the purple and the healing and, you know, the coolness and the lightness of it, it actually is a symbolism of a communication tool. It's something that is meant to allow more communication to be in that environment. And so whilst I'm really mindful that some people are really uncomfortable with things like this, I would recommend for the audience to start practicing small. So practice self-care, practice mindfulness, which is more readily available and accepted within your work environment. And as we did a little bit earlier, that breath work that we did, which was just a very short, brief, inexpensive way of holding that space for you. And I think you'll find that potentially it will help ease the symptoms of your current environment that you're facing. And if it can provide you with some sort of relief, I think it can only help you, and it can only be the better for you.
I think so too. And now more than ever, I'm willing to get my hands on anything and everything just to continue to protect my well-being, and especially during this time of uncertainty. So thank you for sharing all of that. I would love to know, before we dive into questions, although if anyone who's listening does have questions, you can start typing them in and we'll get to them as soon as possible. But just before we go into that, I would love to know a bit more about what you do specialize in with GlowStar, and what's coming up next for you.
Yeah, so GlowStarHive was originally created for young girls between the ages of 9 and 16. I realised that there was a growing need for people to have life skills or life tools to help them cope later on in life. The foundations of the business was to teach, as you had mentioned earlier, resilience, increased self-image or self-esteem, and interpersonal communication skills. But as a result of COVID and our new lifestyle changes with restrictions and the social distancing and self-isolation, I realised that more and more people were starting to feel uncomfortable and unsettled. And I think we're also going through a stage, and as people are working from home now, you'll start to feel it compound and build up, because we've now had probably close to a month of it just being this way, where it's kind of been a new norm, but we haven't had the so-called explosion yet. I don't think it's just a plateau. I think that there is still some elements of fear that people are facing, and lots of instability that people are facing. And so I opened up my target audience to make this available to all ages. So originally it was more like a community space and a group, which is what my Instagram account is all about. It's filled with positivity and inspiration. And now that we have the restrictions, I'm not able to reach out and hold almost like circles where people can come and gather and have face-to-face meditation. So I think the holistic coaching is one approach that I could reach out to people and also help them through from a guidance perspective, to guide them through their fears or any sort of negative feelings that they may be facing and coming to the surface and not being able to deal with. And I know that you have the trauma specialist as well, who's available for anybody who does have that sense of
unrest.
So but this one is more of a long-term tool that we can progressively work on. And as I had said previously before, it's about taking accountability of your own actions and being able to guide yourself through this process with as much care and kindness to yourself that you can.
And I think part of that as well is being just patient with yourself. No one really knows what's going to happen next. And I think that as tempting as it can be to hold ourselves to a high expectation to be handling this a certain way, most of us have never been through anything like this before. So now more than ever, it's just, practicing that patience for both ourselves and for the people we are surrounded by, I think will go a long way into that kind of kindness and awareness piece as well. So thank you. So it looks like I'll keep waiting on the questions in case any come through, but I guess I have got a couple questions myself. These are just for fun. I would love to know, if you could do any job in the world, anything just strange, weird and wacky, what would your thing be? For me, I think it would be like a nail polish namer. I don't know what their title is, but apparently someone out there gets paid to come up with the nail polish colors, and I kind of love that. So I would love to know what your weird and wacky job is.
I was like, why are you stopping at nail polishes? You could go lipsticks and
oh, I'm just obsessed at the moment with I don't know.
Well, I'm going to go on similar lines. Not so much a name creator. I love colored pens. So all my notes are filled with color. And even when I was preparing for tonight, I wrote in blue, and then I created things in pencil, and then some black and some purple. And but what I would like to do is almost like create a mood pen as such.
Ooh, so similar to a mood ring where it just changes according to the mood that you're at. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly right.
So really it's more about temperature than mood, but we won't destroy the magic behind it. We'll keep it. Oh, I love that. That's such a fun way to wrap things up on. Well, for anyone who is interested in learning more about your holistic practices and interested in just having a conversation about where this could lead them, or where to begin, what is your preferred contact method? Where can we all find you?
So you can find me at GlowStarHive. I'm on Facebook. My website is currently in progress, so I don't have that available, but I am on Instagram, as I've mentioned before, and there is a community of positivity and inspirational posts that are on there, but a lot of my content and updates will be available through Facebook. For those who want to email, GlowStarHive@gmail, until I can work out my website. And those who want to, who don't have those channels, you can reach out to me personally on Messenger or my LinkedIn profile under my personal name.
And you also touched on this briefly as well, but you said that now that you have migrated more digitally, are you also doing that one-on-one camera, or is it more audio? I guess for the people who want to remain anonymous, I don't know, how does that all work?
So I am offering Zoom sessions. I
Great,
also
yeah.
can offer a group meditation. So that was something that I had tossed around the idea of doing potentially a group meditation, but after I have it ready, but we don't have time to do it tonight. So, I mean, it could potentially be something that I could post online or do it in a guided. So one thing is, which is probably no coincidence, but maybe tonight's a full moon, and
Oh, what, really? That's awesome.
yeah, and it's really significant to me because I really pick up on the full moon energies. And for those who are out there, I think it's really a great opportunity to really that visualization of standing underneath the full moon and allowing all the new opportunities to come in. But it's also an opportunity to then, as the full moon is weaning away to a crescent, it's really about letting go of the things that no longer serve you. And whilst we're in this place and this unusual state of being, it's very much about letting go of a lot of things that you need to let go of. And yeah, so if anyone wants to reach out, so anyone wants to do a meditation, happy to do it within a group environment online or via Zoom, or I can post it on Facebook. So just reach out and we can discuss what the best channel is. But from a anonymous perspective, I don't think that can help out in any way, but I guess the email is probably the best way then, if that's the case.
Sure. Well, I love what you said about this being a full moon. I feel like that's such a magical note to end things on, and a really nice way of staying open to the changes that are happening around us all and looking at things with a more positive light, and also tapping into that support network that you kindly offered. So thank you so much, Vivien, for your time tonight. I think we've all learned a lot and gained some self-awareness, and hopefully we're feeling a lot more at ease as well. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
Speak soon. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.